The Brighton Center for the Performing Arts is bringing Evening of Broadway to audiences with their The Best of Broadway, the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber, and more. Today, we're speaking with Terry Barber, an internationally acclaimed countertenor who was featured in the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
We are so excited to talk to you about this and to talk about this incredible night that's happening. To kick it off, I'm kind of wondering if you can tell the people, what is the Best of Broadway? Like, what is this night consisting of for them?
Right. So this is one of my most requested tour programs. I have two that are really the most requested. And this one, I really love. When you think about the music of any composer, it tends to have a sound. And that makes sense if you are having a dinner party and you want to put an album on and have a sound that is continuous kind of throughout the vibe that you're trying to create. However, when it comes to live entertainment, I prefer a lot of variety. Fast, slow, funny, sad, all the things, right? The music of Andrew Lloyd Webber, you can look at his work and see and hear things that sound like rock, things that sound like traditional Broadway sounds, and some even that sound like classical. So there's really a lot of variety within the show itself. And so we're doing music from Phantom of the Opera, of course, which is the longest running show on Broadway. The sequel to Phantom of the Opera, Love Never Dies, Evita, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Joseph the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and some other Lloyd Webber shows, but also some music from Les Miserables, which happens to be my favorite musical, and Chicago, and Hamilton. So really, we're trying to cross-section the Broadway genre and bring people an entertaining evening with a lot of variety.
I mean, that's really hitting a lot of the like classic Broadway, but also just like the big hits from Broadway for
it's going to be
the audience.
Show-stopping hits for sure. Like, when I didn't mention Cats, but we are doing a song from Cats, and you probably can guess which one it is. It's probably the most performed and recorded Andrew Lloyd Webber song. In fact, I would guess there are people in our culture that don't know it's from a musical because it's been performed so often in so many genres by so many artists that it's kind of transcended musical theater, and that is Memory, of course, that I'm talking about from Cats.
I was going to say, as soon as you said the Cats, I said it has to be Memory. That's the one song that really kind of encapsulates that show.
That song is going to be my musical arrangement that I created as a duet. So though people have heard the song Memory many times, they probably have not heard it as a duet. And so my collaborator, Shelley Keeler, who's coming up from Florida, who is an award-winning singing actress, will be sharing the stage with me for that number, as well as several other duets, and also bringing her power as a soloist to songs like Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. So, just really, she's one of my favorite people. She and I connected about a decade ago when she was doing some work with a nonprofit that I founded that helps artists use their talents in the community to help others. And I heard and saw her and said, "Oh, I want to steal her for my personal tours." And so that's how our work together began, and we become best friends. And I'm enamored with her as a person, but also her talent is just amazing. I know everyone will love it.
I mean, she sounds like the perfect counterbalance to you.
She's fun. She's incredibly professional, hardworking, and her talent is immense. So it's always great to share the stage with her. She has her own tour that she's working on now. That is the music of kind of a tribute to Bette Midler. We all do our own things, and then we come together to do the things that we do together. And she's been in several of my tour programs, and this is the one that's the most requested, as I said. And we have a chamber orchestra of musicians who are coming from Cleveland Institute of Music and also from Florida. My reed player friend, Rick Kissinger, plays oboe, English horn, flute, saxophone, clarinet. So he'll be playing flute, clarinet, and saxophone on this show. And then we have a cellist and violinist and concert pianist from Cleveland Institute of Music coming to round out the chamber orchestra. So it's going to be a really nice sound. And then we also have some local students, right?
What is that like to bring them into that production? It has to be really cool to have some local students there with you.
For sure. So I really care about the next generation of artists and their exposure to what it's like to be a professional working artist, but also um, just the next generation generally, exposing them to the arts. And so I'm always looking for an opportunity to do what we call outreach, which is um, in my world can take on various different forms. It can be a mini concert for the general public, as far, any school of any age. It can be working with people that are aspiring artists, which in this case is what we're doing. And I've been working with Philip Johnson, who is conductor of the Brighton High School choirs, and he's helping me to identify which soloists might need get a great opportunity, and which and also involve his choir. So we're going to be doing Masquerade, which is a big number, of course, from Phantom of the Opera, and his choir will join on that. They'll also join on the encore, which, spoiler alert, is the Phantom of the Opera, probably the biggest hit
Classic
of all. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and then they'll also be singing on one more thing, which I can't recall right now. There are some soprano soloists that are going to be getting an opportunity to sing both in the Phantom of the Opera song, but also they're going to be singing "Think of Me." So I'll be coaching them the day before. Philip will have prepared them musically, and I'll be working with them in a public setting so that folks can see what my suggestions are and how that might impact their performance. And then I'll condition them for the sound check the next day and let them know, okay, this is where you're going to enter. So I am producing, writing, casting, musically directing all of my tours. And yes, I am a control freak. But
you're just passionate about the project.
It's true. And I actually have some projects where I don't do all the things, like where it's divvied up between different people. But most musicians and singing instrumentalists and singing actors are used to being engaged to use their talent, but they're not all producers or music directors or me wearing all those hats is really just to justify or to facilitate the outcome, which is the show that they're going to see on February 14th. A romantic opportunity for you if you don't have any tickets or anything to do with your other half on this special day. There's still a chance to save yourself out there if you're listening. There are some seats left. It's not completely sold out, but I would say don't wait a long time.
Like, this is really truly like the perfect night to have it. Valentine's Day. Like, what a great way to kind of, Andrew Lloyd Webber, it is like, they're so romantic of music. You know what I mean? Like, the songs are just, they are perfect for the holiday.
For sure. All I ask of you, for example, which I'll sing as a duet with Shelley, the first time I learned that song, I actually didn't know about Phantom of the Opera. My cousin was getting married, and they wanted that for their wedding song. And so I learned it for that. And then, this was a long time ago, back when the musical just came out, right? So, but yeah, my introduction to that song in particular was for its romantic power. And so, there are going to be a lot of opportunities for you to make your loved one feel special and recognized. And I'm also singing an arrangement of La Vie Amoureuse, which I believe is the most romantic song ever written. I'm using my artistic license to do two songs that are not from a musical in the show, but they're among the most requested from one of my other tours. So I just like to kind of tease the audience with, I also do this, and this is what people want me to do. So I'll sing that and Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, my own arrangement.
That's awesome. It's perfect to give them a little taste of what else you're doing and stuff like that. But when it comes to like developing this show, you mentioned this is your most requested. How did the show kind of come to be? Like, how do you decide what music to pick? How do you decide how to make the best of Broadway?
That is such a great question. I love it. So the first thing that happened, well, my training was at my undergraduate degree at Northwestern University. I was studying vocal performance, but I also did the musical theater certificate program there. I immediately, because I'm a countertenor, I immediately went to England to do my master's degree after that, and was very focused on pre-classical, meaning like Baroque and before era music, which it was the perfect place to go study it because I could actually go to the British Music Library and get the original scores of Bach and Handel, Purcell in my hands.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of the international countertenor battleground is London. They all kind of come from everywhere to duke it out. And so it was a great opportunity for me to insert myself into that. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is through that process, I kind of went down the rabbit hole on my love of classical and early music in particular, and had left musical theater to the side, even though I always loved it, but was not doing a lot of musical theater. And when I started to do, let's see, after that, I went back to the US and joined a group called Chanticleer that was a world tour. It was the only salary health benefit singing job in the country for 12 artists at the time. So it was a good reason to come back to the US. I left that group to go to New York and sing at the Metropolitan Opera, New York City Opera, Carnegie Hall. So I was very focused on classical, almost like to the point of snobbery.
Okay.
And when I started to do my own touring in 2013, a producer came to the show who I didn't know. He was a legendary music entrepreneur who had helped the world discover Elvis. He was a DJ at the time, who was one of the first people to play Elvis's music on the radio. He worked with Casey Kasem, like all these kind of big names in the entertainment industry at the time. He heard me and he took me aside and he said, "I want to co-produce a show with you. And I really would like you to think about the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber." And I just was like, "Oh no." At this point in my my head, I was so focused on kind of classical and whatever, that I was like, "Oh, then no, I'm not doing that." And like after 2 days of it rolling around in my head, I started thinking, he's right. Like, I need to do this. And it was, I mean, I love musical theater, and there are 2 or 3 shows by Andrew Lloyd Webber that are among my favorite shows in the genre. Evita, Jesus Christ Superstar, of course, Phantom is undeniable. I mentioned Les Mis is my absolute favorite, but um, so what I started realizing is that it would make a great show. That it's about what the audience wants. And your previous question, what do I do to put this stuff together? The first thing I think is, what does my audience want? Like, if I'm going to sing one song from Cats, what are they coming to hear? What are they
Sure.
thinking? And it's palpable in the audience when you get to certain songs, and even you mention the name and they're like, oh, like, yes, that's what I want, And so giving the audience what they want is certainly one of the top goals. The next one is really to take them on an emotional journey. And so
Okay.
I don't want it to be all happy, all sad, all upbeat, all whatever. I want them to relive those moments in the show, reconnect with the character, and understand what's going on for them in that moment. And so, I'll give them a little information or set up the scene often so that they can revisit, or if they haven't seen the show, understand, like, why is this character so pissed off or whatever,
Right.
And so, for example, in the sequel to Phantom of the Opera, which a lot of people don't know, it's been 10 years since the Phantom has had any access to his muse. He has not heard the voice of Christine. He's not seen her, and he's not happy about it at all. It's basically destroying him. And he sings this song at the beginning of the show called "Till I Hear You Sing." And so that's kind of the context that I'll give them before we start it, so they know, like, why is this guy so angry? But
Right.
Yeah. Did I answer your questions? I think so.
No, you did absolutely. So it sounds like it's really it's part giving the people what they want, but also giving them an emotional journey that is like that you want to provide them for a show like
Right.
this.
Yeah, I want them to have some moments where like, oh, like that feeling of being in love, or oh, something horrible has happened to this person and we all feel for them. Like when I'm going to be singing Bring Him Home from Les Miserables, and I'll start it off in French because it was originally written in French, and I want people to hear those original lyrics, and then I'll change to English lyrics in the middle so they can hear what they're used to hearing.
Sure.
But one thing I like to let them know is that we have context for this in our own culture, and it is the families of our fallen heroes, the people who have sent their children off to war, or their dad, or whatever it is, and that feeling of just hope and prayer and whatever it would take to get that person back safely. And so I think a lot of people, that resonates with them. They understand that, like, oh my God, my uncle, you know, died in World War II or whatever it is, right? And so they have a real context for what is happening in the show in that moment when Jean Valjean is asking God to bring Marius back from the revolution where he's gone off to fight. So yeah.
So you had mentioned that you got to kind of go to the battleground of countertenors to learn in England. But for those who maybe don't know, what is a countertenor?
This is a great question. And the reason is that it's the least common vocal category, right? In school, when they told you that tenor was the highest singing voice for men, they lied. The countertenor
Okay.
is the guy who sings in the range above that. And it's not very common. However, in popular music, we hear it so much that we don't think anything of it. Roy Orbison, the Bee Gees, Frankie Valli, Michael Jackson, Prince, Sam Smith, Adam Lambert. You know, these guys are singing in an extremely high range above where we normally hear a tenor. And so technically they really are countertenors. There's one in the pentatonics. A countertenor is really singing alto most of the time. Countertenor is
Okay.
not a specific term like tenor or alto, which is also confusing to people because a countertenor can be a contralto, a mezzo soprano, or even a soprano. And so a countertenor just basically means a man who sings in the range mostly above tenor, where we typically hear women singing. And
Okay.
so the next question I usually get is, why do we want men to sing in the range of women? Because women do a pretty good job. They don't need us to do that. And historically, the reason why we have countertenors and why they do a lot of work in the pre-classical era for opera and oratorio is that in that period, men who sang in this high range did so in a horrifyingly unnatural way. I'm talking about
Okay.
the tradition of the castrato. Castrati is the plural. And that is men who were castrated when they were boys to preserve their vocal instrument and became a different type of human, a different type of vocal ability, who were immersed in full-time music study of harpsichord, violin, composing, and vocal technique from the age of 8 or whatever, right? So,
Okay.
musical prodigies who became the rock stars of their day. Handel wrote 29 oratorios and 42 operas with the idea that they would sing the roles of men and women because men and women were not allowed to be on stage together. Now, that's a lot of
Okay.
history that I'm not going to be covering in the show, but I will tell you that this is a reason why countertenors are valuable in that kind of music, because we either can have women who dress as men who can sing that music well in the same range, or we can use countertenors, which is a little more easy for the audience, I think, to look at and understand. And so, yeah, countertenors do a lot of work in that era, the pre-classical music.
That is, I mean, it's, you said that's a lot of history, but that's really interesting because it kind of helps to paint a picture of why this is important to have a countertenor in any kind of music, really.
Right, in barbershop quartets, you always have that guy who sings above the melody. He's really using mode 2 of his voice or head voice countertenors don't like the word falsetto. I could tell you mostly, even though that is what most people think of it. It that means literally false voice, and um,
Okay.
a lot of people who are not trained and don't have the facility to be a countertenor have some falsetto, which is usually an unsupported breathy sound where the chords aren't properly coming together. And so that's not what countertenors are doing mostly if they're good singers. But yes, it is that same vocal range that, every guy has to, and every woman really, once they're past adolescence, have two voices, an upper voice and a lower voice. Now, they'll be hearing me sing baritone, tenor, and mezzo soprano in the program. So I do this program sometimes by myself for smaller
Okay.
venues with lower budgets, with with fewer instruments. And so in that program, I would, be all solos. But because this is a bigger show, we have more talent. And so I actually have some actual female sopranos who can cover some of the highest things. But I'm still going to sing one duet, Pie Jesu, from the Requiem, which is written for boy soprano and soprano. And I'm going to be doing the boy soprano role part.
That's incredible. That's going to be such a great performance to see there.
Thank you. Yeah,
Uh,
it's a sad piece because Lloyd Webber wrote that for his father.
okay.
It's from the Requiem, which of course is a mass for the dead, and the piece is translated, "Kind Lord, grant them everlasting peace." So I asked the audience, you might want to think about someone that you like to remember, while we share that.
That's awesome. So when did you first realize that maybe your countertenor voice was something special and maybe not something unusual?
Yeah, that's that's such a good question too. So I was a boy soprano, and I started my voice private lessons at age 7. And when I was 9, there was a new opera company in New Hampshire where I was living at the time called Opera North, and they were doing an opera called Amal and the Night Visitors. And it's a Giancarlo Menotti. It's a story of a crippled boy who um, is healed because of his in a moment of wanting to give something to Christ. He offers his crutch, and in that moment, he's healed, and he goes off with the 3 wise men to thank Christ and give him his crutch as a gift. And so it's a beautiful story. And the title role is a boy soprano. And so I showed up at this open call, and they had already identified a young girl that they were going to use. I could tell, like, from the audition. I remember this when I was 9. Um, you know, but after I auditioned, they decided to give the role to me, and then I did that. There was their inaugural production, and then they decided to repeat the opera the next year when I was 10. So I did that again, and so I had already kind of established, like, that I loved singing. I was singing all the time. When my voice changed, I got a lot more low notes, but I still kind of had all that high facility. And I remember in high school, I was singing tenor because that's the highest voice for men, and that's where they put you. But sometimes the sopranos would be like, "Oh, I can't hit this note," and I'd make fun of them and, like, sing it.
Sure. You're like, here it
I'd be
is.
like, "Oh, you can't hit this note," like, whatever. And so I remember just realizing, like, okay, I can sing up there or whatever. And then I went to Northwestern as a double degree in engineering, and my voice teacher had asked me to sing a Baroque piece, and I had never sung something from the Baroque. So, like a good music nerd that I am, I went to the library to listen to recordings of other people singing the piece, and they were all men and singing in this weird high range. And I was like, "What octave do you want me to sing this in?" And he said, "I was thinking kind of the normal one, but let's hear it." And I sang it for
Sure.
him, and he kind of sat me down and said, "This is a real boon for you, like a real possible career opportunity if you like this kind of music and you decide you want to focus in this area." And it was weird because, like, suddenly all the vocal professors, I mean, you understand the vibe of these music conservatories or like the music departments at these big programs. Suddenly they all were like, you know, giving me some special attention, like, "Oh my, well, this guy's going to have an easy time of making a career. And that was very encouraging. At the time, there weren't as many countertenors as there are now. Now people are really discovering it more in the industry. Outside the industry, we're still pretty in the dark about it. But in the
Sure.
industry, at music conservatories, everyone's heard of a countertenor right now.
Yeah. So what do you think is like the biggest misconception that people have about countertenors?
Well, there are always jokes, right? I mean, I already said about, you know, one of the most famous countertenors of all time, James Bowman, who was the most recorded countertenor at the time when I lived in England. He came to a masterclass where I was performing to give the masterclass, and I remember him telling a story that just was hilarious. He said a woman came up to him after the show that he had given and took him aside and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Bowman, is it something physical?"
Okay. That's
Is there
ballsy.
something wrong with you, basically?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
do you have parts that don't work or, whatever? And so, I think we all have to kind of be prepared for the fact that it is different. When you hear people singing in that range in popular music, it's not so different to our ear. But when you hear it in the context of bel canto or classical operatic singing, for a man to be in that range is weird to a lot of people.
When it comes to your classical training, how do you feel that approach influences maybe non-classical genres that you're singing?
I could take this to every master class. This is the question. The question is the same answer, whether you are a painter or an actor or a saxophone player or a singer. And that is my personal value. My personal belief is that you start with classical. And if
Okay.
you're a dancer, we've all seen the show So You Think You Can Dance, and you can watch the the classically trained dancer get up and do hip hop and get up and do salsa and get up and do all these things because they have a tool set that they can use to translate into these other things with health. And it's the same thing with singing. I have sung new age music. I've sung popular music. I've sung musical theater. The musical theater I'm singing in this show is rock tenor and classical mezzo soprano, and like it's all over the place, right? And so
Sure.
if I didn't have a technique that was based in classical, that would not be happening.
So it's always the foundation of whatever you sing.
It is, but I think you have to be a lover. So one of my new projects, which I'm really excited about, is called The Three Tenors of the Americas. And we've got a Canada Idol finalist and voice finalist who is representing Canada. His name's Mark Devine. He's bilingual, francophone. And we have Rodrigo Garcia, who is from Mexico City. And he's like a Domingo type tenor, dramatic tenor, which is like a darker, warmer, fuller sound. And one of the things we're doing is we're not just doing the kind of things that you would expect from the three tenors of the Americas, celebrating our neighboring cultures, singing in Spanish, French, and English mostly. But we're also wanting to sing some songs that have been made famous by the best singers of each of our cultures. So we have a Whitney Houston song that we're working on, for example, I Have Nothing. And Mark, the Canadian tenor, and I have a lot of love and experience singing more popular music. And the Mexican tenor loves the music, but he doesn't have as much experience in it. And so we're trying to choose those moments where, okay, we can really have a full, legit sound on this line, but it sounds like a mockery if we do put it on this line, right? And so either he has to change his technique for that, or we assign it to somebody else who's more comfortable. And so, yeah, they're both incredible artists, and I'm really excited about the project. And we will be taking it around the States next season. But yeah, that's a perfect question. Is how do you approach I don't do a lot of jazz, even though it's one of my favorite genres. And that is because I feel like to be the kind of jazz artist that I would want to be, I need to have 300 charts in my head and know,
Sure.
like all these things. I need to be, be able to scat a B flat blues and whatever, all these things that I know are great skills for jazz artists that I love and appreciate. Ella Fitzgerald's one of my favorite artists of all time. Um, and so I know where my limits are as far as what I can do with authenticity um, in that genre in particular. Um, and so I won't be releasing a hard hitting, scat album
Not
anytime soon.
yet. One day. But it sounds like you already have so many things on the docket. This sounds like a really cool project that you're working on. Are there other things that you're also working on as well?
Sure. So my other most requested tour program that is current that I just did in Michigan in January is Mercury, a tribute to Queen's lead singer. And so, as you probably are gathering from me, my master's degree is in historically informed performance. So I like
Okay.
to I like to know about things, and I like to do it with authenticity, and I like to deliver it in a way that it respects the origins in every genre, right? And so to do with Freddie Mercury, the first thing I did was read 5 biographies about him and then go to his interviews to understand like what does my audience want to know? How are they going to get to know him? So I'm not going to impersonate him because I feel like there are a few technical reasons, like he had vocal nodules and in the upper part of his voice, he sang amazingly with that and had that gritty rock sound, which I am never going to try to have in my voice because um, it would keep me from doing the other things I do with authenticity.
Sure.
Um, but also the amount of bravado and flamboyance that he brought to the table for everything he did. So what I would deliver in that show is quotes, his actual words, stories, set up the music. This was what was going on, his determination to perform and record through his failing health certainly inspired Brian May to write The Show Must Go On. Right. And so
Okay.
we get that moment in his life when things weren't going so well for his health and he was struggling, and yet he was still killing it, and so,
Sure.
yeah, again, taking them on a journey of these hit songs that they all know. I mean, the band, an incredible, probably the smartest rock band in history, all wrote hit songs, and all are songs that everyone that's alive has heard. So
What I love about that is that you really are, it's not just going and performing songs. You are trying to build the whole experience and make sure that you are like well informed about these things that you are performing, which is maybe even a lot of work that people don't even recognize goes into developing shows or, tours or performances.
when my agent, who is an opera agent, told me, I have this opportunity for you to tour your own tour, make your own tour. And I said, what tour? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have a tour. And so one of my first challenges was in those moments where I was connecting with the audience and trying to get them into the moment of the art and be entertained, because as one of my favorite concert pianists that I worked with of all time, Alina Kiryeva, who was scholarship through her undergrad and master's at Juilliard for a concert pianist. She said, I knew I was a great musician and a great artist when I met you, but I didn't know what it meant to be an entertainer.
Sure.
And so that's kind of another whole skill set that I think great people who have their own performances need to have.
Absolutely. With you touring though and doing all this performing, I do wonder as a psychologist, how do you keep your mental health up? How do you keep yourself strong as you're going from city to city, town to town, bouncing back and forth? That has to be difficult, especially when you're giving your all in every performance on every stage you're going to.
That's only a psychologist would have that perspective and be able to um, shine a light on one of the hardest things about being an artist. I have to say, one of my favorite performers at Northwestern when I was young, Jessica Henson, she right out of undergrad was cast as Christine in the national tour of Phantom of the Opera. And it was in her first contract, her first 6 months on the road doing that work, that she realized she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to be the artist doing the things that she had dreamed of her whole life, because the reality is very trying. It's very different than a lot of people might
Sure.
realize. And so, um, what I see from my fellow artists is that we are up there giving it our all, and we're sweating and we're emoting, and it's emotionally draining for me to take the people on a journey where I'm angry here and I'm crying there, and and laughing here and
Right.
whatever. So it is physically and emotionally draining, and in a great way. I mean, it's cathartic for me. I always joke with the audience and say I'm such an optimistic, happy person, and yet my favorite songs to perform are the angry ones, because that allows me to get that emotion out, which I don't usually visit. And so I tell the audience,
Sure.
thank you for being my therapist tonight. You know, while I
That's
performed
awesome.
the angriest piece on the program, from Jesus Christ Superstar. You know. But yeah, it is emotionally draining. It is, part of your whole understanding, self-awareness. When I start feeling like I might not be 100% healthy wise, I might have, be on the verge of getting something. I have like herbal supplements that I know I take that kind of help me with that. I take a lot of probiotics when I'm on the road. I wash my hands like a crazy person.
Sure.
Um, there are a lot of things that I do, and singers can get a little overboard with some of that. And sometimes this part and this part are so close that they start telling themselves, well, I have to have a scarf. I can't sing and if it's too humid or whatever. Like these things that may or may not be real. So keeping tabs on what is real and what is actually needed to be successful. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I love it. I've been doing it since I can remember, and I don't have an end date yet.
Sure.
So
Do you think that part of the outreach that you had mentioned, going to places and giving those performances and working with people, does that help to also kind of like mentally rejuvenate you as well? That like, yes, you're still giving your energy, but it's something that seems very important to you.
So the audience is incredibly important as a piece of the puzzle, right? And so
Sure.
you see these Broadway shows, for example, where like every Saturday matinee, they know that the audience is going to be a different creature than the Friday night or whatever. Like, and so they get kind of conditioned. And for me, in each venue, I want it to feel more like a conversation with the
Sure.
audience rather than a monologue. Like I want to feel like we get to know each other, and in each audience is its own animal. And I do feel like their energy is a piece of my everybody on stage. I don't, it's interesting. I don't think the audience realizes how much their involvement affects the total performance in everything live, and that's one of the reasons we do live, right? Like you want it to be perfect, you can watch the video or whatever, or
Sure.
put on the recording, but live is something different. Like we're really there. We're really feeling this all together. It's like, do you want to watch your favorite comedy movie that's just come out by yourself on TV at home? Or do you want to be in a room with 1,000 people laughing and, and experiencing it for the first time? It's there's no replacement for that experience. Did I answer the question? I feel like I might.
No, you did. You did. You did. So then just one final question for you is just what are you hoping audiences take away from this performance?
That's great. I want them to hear some of the things that they were hoping they would hear. I want them to experience some of the up and coming talent that they might be interested to follow in their own community, who are have been identified as exceptional and deserving a spotlight here. Um, I would like them to go on this emotional journey with us and revisit those moments that are, I think, some of the most impactful, and the characters from this wide array of shows. So, I want it to be an experience. I think that's the word that you said earlier that really makes sense. It resonates with me. It's not Freddie Mercury. One of his quotes is, "Our performances are not a live rendition of our album. It's a theatrical event." And so,
Sure.
I want it to be an experience for everyone, for sure.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it's going to be. And we're, again, so excited for you to be coming here and to be at the Brighton Center for the Performing Arts. And so thank you for being here to talk with us. And thank you for coming and spending your Valentine's Day with a whole bunch of people and spreading some Broadway love.
Yes. Maybe I'll find my new Valentine.
It's possible.
Right.
So the best of...
Click the link below and sign an application. No, I'm kidding. Apply now.
We'll put a Google form up for everybody. But thank you again for being here. It's been such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm excited.
So the Best of Broadway, the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber More, happens on Saturday, February 14th at 7:30 p.m. at the Brighton Center for the Performing Arts. So get your tickets now and we'll see you at the show.